Tell me, has this kind of violence received a fillip ever since Gaddafi was dispensed with by the West and Saudi Arabia in Libya? Because if you remember, with the collapse of Gaddafi and the Libyan establishment, you had all these people cross over into, and with all the arms, they went at first, if you remember, they had virtually taken over northern Mali, and then the French had to intervene and push them and somehow secure Bamako, which is the capital of Mali. And then they have now, apparently, there is a suggestion that plenty of the people who are with Boko Haram are actually not Nigerians. Any comment on that?
I would differ slightly on this. Boko Haram actually was formed by a very, very influential cleric, a Salafist, called Muhammad Yusuf in Maiduguri, way back in 2002.
Yes, I see.
And for the first 7 years, it was basically indoctrinating people into Salafist Islam. It was in 2009 that Boko Haram became violent, because there was a crackdown by the government, a very effective crackdown in which Muhammad Yusuf himself died.
Not only died, apparently he was killed in front of television cameras.
That's right. He was shown on television, later on his dead body was shown.
A dead body, it is a little bit like the Lal Masjid fiasco in Islamabad, where it just happened in front of people's eyes, and that aggravated the whole thing. Is that the picture?
That's the picture. And a new leader called Abu Bakr Shekau took over, who is still the leader of Boko Haram.
Right.
And they became more and more violent after 2009.
Yes.
And he already explained, and you also explained in your introduction, already in 2014, we are only into 5 months of 2000, more than 1,500 people have died. And initially it was confined to the northeastern states of Borno, Yobe and Adamawa.
Yes.
But now it has reached all the way up to Abuja. You had a bus bombing in the bus station. So they are getting more and more support. The question is, are they linked to other terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda? Now there are various versions.
Now, in fact, Al-Qaeda, whether Al-Qaeda is involved or not, we were talking about Al-Qaeda and its influence on the Boko Haram movement. Also, where is the oxygen coming for Boko Haram? Why is it becoming more and more powerful with each passing month?
Saeed Bhai, you asked two questions. So first is regarding the Boko Haram's links. There are 3 or 4 major groups in Africa today. One is the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, which is in the Maghreb region. Then you have the famous Al-Shabaab in Somalia.
Yes.
And then you mentioned Mali, and there was a group called Ansar Deen.
Yes.
So there are some reports that all of them are linked very loosely, even though they are not tight-knit organizations. Now, where does Boko Haram gets its oxygen? It's basically the clerics and the unemployed youth in the north and northeast of Nigeria. The poverty levels are very high. Nigeria by itself, even though it's a rich country, the per capita income is more than $2,500. But actually, out of 170 million people, more than 100 million people live on less than $1 a day. And in the north and the northeast, this proportion goes to almost 70% of the people in the north and northeast live on less than $1 a day. And that also goes, there are no good schools, no good hospitals. So Boko Haram presents a kind of platform.
What you're saying, this is exactly, John, I was reading this book by Naipaul on Africa, I think The Mask of Africa, something like that. And he describes a scene in Kano. He says on Friday, after the Friday prayers, you stand there and in front of the mosque you have these very skinny young Muslim children seeking alms. And he says, I wondered, this is an oil-rich country, it has other minerals, and all the people, the young people in the north, to reinforce what you're saying, Vish, that they are in fact, so this disparity in incomes. How do you explain it? I think you touched on a bit of it, that because of corruption, that in fact oil is, moreover, there is no oil industry in Nigeria, isn't it?
No, there is. They have refineries, but much
No,
of
there's
it.
no, from what my information is, that all the refineries are shut. In fact, the
Yeah,
economy
yeah.
is controlled by the Americans. Is that right?
It is true. For a country which is the fourth largest or the fifth largest oil producer, they hardly have any refinery. There is one in Kaduna and one in Port Harcourt, and both are not working to the full capacity.
Yes.
So they in fact import most of the oil. And incidentally, as an aside, let me say that 40% of India's exports to Africa totally today are refined petroleum products.
Really?
Yeah. So India actually is exporting a lot of petroleum products.
So the
to
Americans take the crude, they refine it and sell it. We meanwhile get our oil from wherever, and then petroleum products from here, per courtesy High Commissioner to Lagos, H Viswanathan. So Indian market there has expanded.
The second thing is the state governments complain that the oil, they are not being paid by the center, or they are not being funded by the center enough for progress. That is also actually not true, because the southeast, for example, the oil producing region have been clamoring that they produce the oil, but they don't get any benefits. It is true that the center has not been forthcoming to the extent they should, but even the little money that the central government gives to this region doesn't reach the people, because the model is all wrong. They choose some of the local leaders and kind of outsource management of that region to them, and the local leaders siphon off the money.
John, the impression I get is that the northern half is in fact much more feudal than the southern. There is apparently the Amir of Kano, and are there other Amirs? Is there?
Yes, there are. You see, so there is the Sultan of Sokoto. In fact, the Boko Haram has been targeting this feudal emirs and the feudal leadership in Kano and Sokoto and other areas. They say that these emirs have sold out to the government. They are so that also makes them popular at the grassroots level.
Yes.
So
very interesting, because Boko Haram, if it is any links with Al Qaeda, and Al Qaeda is links with the Wahhabism of Saudi Arabia, it underpins the Saudi royalty, the Saudi royal family is supported in fact by the Wahhabi establishment. And here you're saying that in fact Boko Haram, which derives its impulses from Al Qaeda, is opposed to the feudalism of the old sultans.
No, I think they have
It's
only
not direct
recently said that. I mean, I think last year only they said we are become an affiliate of the Al Qaeda. So I think it's a very locally grown movement.
It's not very much is known, Vishi, that on the one hand you have in the north a feudal system where 8 or 9 of the local states are run under Sharia law.
12 of them, in fact.
12 of them are under Sharia law. How many are there in Nigeria?
Nigeria, there are 36 states and 1 federal capital territory. So 37 entities.
But 12 of them are under Sharia. Now this itself is a huge anomaly, and no one speaks. And the Americans are so powerful there; they seem to have acquiesced, and they have accepted this state of affairs.
But the tragedy is that the contradiction is that even where there are Sharia laws, they have not been able to fight corruption. In fact, as one commentator mentioned, that Sharia law actually punishes only small crimes. If somebody steals a goat, he is punished. But governors steal billions and they go scot-free. So that is a
something
contradiction.
on that?
Yes, I remember when I was in Nigeria, there was a letter to the Daily Times. Those days, the Daily Times was the biggest newspaper in Nigeria.
Yes.
And it was signed by the president of the Armed Robbers Association of Nigeria.
Really?
And the letter said that, you know, the pen robbers, meaning the politicians and the bureaucrats, with one signature can rob $1 billion, while we are sentenced to death for just robbing a car or a tire. So Nigerians have a great sense of humor.
So the 12 states of Nigeria, northern states of Nigeria under Sharia law, are not a great advertisement for Sharia.
That's one reason why the Southerners are unhappy. They are unhappy that the Sharia is being implemented in the north, and many of the Northerners themselves are now, and Southerners who are settled in the north are also subject to the Sharia law. And Nigerians like to have their
now. How does Sharia apply to a non-Muslim?
Alcohol, no alcohol sales allowed. For one thing, and for the average Nigerian, he likes a good beer every day.
Yes, yes.
So in the attacks on
So therefore, there's no alcohol in the north, particularly in these 12. There must be a lot of moonshining going on.
Yes, definitely. I don't know.
Of course there are. The other contradiction, Saeed Bhai, is that compare Nigeria and Somalia.
Yes.
In both places, there are these militant groups. Here is Boko Haram, there is Al-Shabaab. But there is actually no comparison, because this so-called failing state or failed state concept does not apply to Nigeria, simply because Nigeria is the biggest economy. It has overtaken South Africa.
Yes.
And it has been growing at the rate of 7% for the past 10 years. And the latest statistic shows that oil sector is not even the biggest contributor to the GDP. Other sectors like agriculture and trade are taking over. So this is a big contradiction, it's a functioning state, but somehow this kind of violence goes on.
There is how do we, supposing we were to start talking about ending this violence, do you see any situation arise, any administrative measure? It is a political problem, isn't it? It is a political problem. How do you address a problem like Boko Haram? Moreover, how do you address it in Nigeria when it is spreading all over North Africa? Day before yesterday, we were talking about Darfur. Darfur, the world's greatest humanitarian crisis, it disappeared. Hey presto, it disappeared. Once the southern Sudan came. Then Sudan became a problem. And then in my travels, I have not seen a more peaceful place than Sudan, believe you me. And if you read the newspaper, you'd imagine that you go out on the street and you'd be molested. But that is not the case. So there's a link up between northern, and I would like to imagine, I was in Somalia. Somalia in the 90s, we had a brigade strength peacekeeping force there in Somalia, in Mogadishu. We did in the 90s. And it was a secular place, very violent. Once they had that cut, it was a very violent place, but by and large, peaceful. Secular. This absence of secularism and this fundamentalism is something that we shall have to come back again and revisit this issue. Well, there we are. Colonialism has left behind many problems, and I think Nigeria is to some extent a post-colonial problem, in the sense that look at the completely North and the South have been patched up together, and one has very little to do with the other culturally and in terms of religious contact. Well, Lord Salisbury, after whom the capital of Zimbabwe, Salisbury, was named, he was told, look, if you expand in this colonial fashion, what will happen to the other people? And he said, the other people, if our ancestors talked of the other people, the great British Empire would not have been made.